right. Okay, so we're hoping to have a very informal webinar so you can ask questions, and you will be I will be sending you the PowerPoint slides later on, and then eventually we hope that the recording link is also available to you in case you want to watch it again. So I'm going to be running the PowerPoints. Karen is going to be running the chat, and Lisa and Michelle are presenting. Okay, so any questions before we get started? We don't think it will take the whole hour and a half to do the presentation, but feel free to ask us questions, okay? All right, I'm going to start sharing. Sharing, and then let's start the presentation.
Okay. Yep, there we are. Small grant proposal. You've got to go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so I was just kind of start off, hopefully kind of reducing a lot of anxiety if you ever had any that, when I first started writing small grants, I was always kind of overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be a lot of paperwork, blah, blah, blah. And the actual grant writing itself really wasn't a lot of strenuous writing. It's a very minimal amount compared to at least what I've been experienced in the planning part is what takes up the most. And if you don't have the planning part figured out, like what exactly you need and how much, how much it is that, or you've done all your research, then it might make it being a little bit more difficult to do. But getting the planning part done first, like it says, is like over half the battle. Once you get that, then the actual paperwork's not that bad at all. That was the best part about it. And I totally forgot to introduce myself again, didn't I? Lisa Miller, Mission Vale High School. So yeah, and those were just, if you go to the next slide real quickly. Oh, can you show it all? Yes. So obviously why you want to do this is because obviously you're passionate about education, et cetera. And if you teach science, there's a whole, slew of labs that, you may really, you want to teach, but can't teach because you don't have the equipment. But this is what the grant writing can really help you with. Biotech equipment was one of the things that I jumped on and was able to almost, I don't even need equipment anymore for any of the biotech because I spent several years kind of piecemealing the items when I could. I didn't get it all at one time. That was one thing. You probably have to get things in little increment amounts, and that's okay. You just kind of have to be patient with that. But hands-on skills, like it says, gives those kids the ability to, get possible internships or, work experience that they may not have thought about beforehand, but it could be for any lab. It doesn't have to be for biotech. I've also wrote smaller little grants there for other items besides biotech that I just needed because it was more up-to-date, science equipment that I wasn't going to get funded at school. So I needed, and I wanted to do it because it made it more exciting and more legit data that they were going to be able to collect. So next slide.
Hi, Michelle Neighbor, El Toro High School. For one of the things too is I've had students as we're doing the different labs. So in terms of like the internships, when we're looking at write these skills down, write the equipment down that you used. I had a student that came back and told me that he was actually placed as a freshman in the chemistry stockroom, which usually doesn't happen with freshmen at UC Davis, because he could list that he had used all of this equipment that, we had spent the time writing the grants in order to get. So I really try to stress to them that, we're spending the time so that way you have this equipment skills that you can then go out and utilize later. So it's a really important thing for them. So we spend the time, they get the payoff. I mean, isn't that why we all do this? The slide, and this I will say, this came from Joe. When I read this, I thought this was very cute. That, you know, if your child asks for $100, what do you ask them? And that's kind of exactly what we're going to be faced with when we have that grant foundation that is saying, well, here's money that's available, but why should we give it to you? And so you kind of really want to think about, we're doing this, especially in the biotech realm, in order to put this money to good use to get that equipment that a lot of our school supply lists are never going to, you know, really allow us to get. I mean, we all have this wonderful thing called Amgen biotech experience, but I know Joe said several times, our goal is for you guys to not have to keep borrowing the equipment. We would like for you to get your equipment. And so she's really showing us what things we need so we become proficient on it. But we down the road need to have our own. And both Lisa and I have done that. I mean, I've been with Amgen since it was Amgen Bruce Wallace. So I think I'm in my 17th year. And I am still looking at certain things, like just recently bought the digital dry bath because I borrowed it from Amgen to see that I wanted it and then wrote a grant for it. So it will definitely be a process you'll go through of building this stuff slowly over time. We can move forward. Lisa.
So the project idea, and first of all, the word project, I just kind of, you know, don't think it has to be this massive thing. It could be just one small lab you have. And those details about, you know, this is the whole researching, getting your 80%, you know, taken care of. So the grant writing is actually very minimal of time. You know, creating this idea, it could be, again, it's just a lab that you have always wanted to do in a better way with better technology. And, you know, you just rewrite it basically to make it apply, I guess, for this grant. You know, and you want to think about all those things that are listed there. You know, what's the goal of it? They're going to ask you that. They're going to ask you, why is it important? Who's going to benefit? Literally all of those things, the timeline, that is verbatim, usually on, at least for any minimum grant, what they're going to ask. And so you get all those done, and, you know, and that way you're just transferring. It's a piece of cake, really. It's not, they're not asking for pages and pages of stuff, which was a huge relief on my part when I first started doing this. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us, as you go through these slides, an example of a project that you asked for a grant, how you, as you go through it, how you customize it for them?
I do have an example of one. We just haven't got to it yet.
Okay.
But I do. Yeah. Michelle, this is yours.
So one of the things is, don't feel like, pretty much with anything we do as teachers, you have to be the one that's inventing that wheel for the first time. Go out to some of the places where they're posted, like Donors Choose, and I'll get into this when I talk about that a little later, and look at what people are asking for. Look at what they're saying is the usefulness for it. We, as you're going to see in the slides to come, have posted our actual grant applications that we've done for the Assistance League, which is one that, you know, is always open to us every year with our school district, as it is with most school districts. PTSO, all of us have them, and they always have things that are out there. So don't feel like you have to come up with all of this. Go and look at some of the ones that are already out there and have been written. And a lot of even the foundations that we're going to be looking at in future slides are going to have, these are previous grants that have been written that we've accepted. So always look for that. And, you know, then push it towards where you have that specific population. You might have like a high, the free and reduced lunch. You might have a population that is serving an underserved community. And a lot of them will really focus on that and say that you're going to have a higher chance of being funded I know Donors Choose lists that and goes over that because you are serving an underserved community, which is something to always find out from your admin. You know, what are our demographics? What things do we have in terms of it? I get asked quite often on the grant applications, you know, what is your amount of free and reduced lunches? And so that will be something that you kind of need to have those numbers. They're obviously always going to be updated, but it's a good idea to have those ahead of time. That's part of the planning process of that 80% of getting those things in order. We can go to the next slide. The other is really focus on the number of students. You might be a teacher just starting off. You've got 25 to 30 years ahead of you. You might be near the end of your career. You have another 5, you have another 10. One of the things you really want to realize is a lot of these grant applications are going to ask how many students are served by this. And so you really want to parlay that out and say, I'm dealing with 130 students every year. I'm going to be doing this for another, 10 years. I almost said 100 years. Oh my gosh, 10 years. And use those numbers, because that really is going to be how many students in your AP or your honors or your regular that are going to be using this equipment over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And those are the numbers that they want to see. So be very clear and concise and really think into the future. I'm not just using it 1 year. This is something that is going to be used over and over again. Again, focus on those job skills that they can use. They really want to see that you're teaching them real world skills. They will then have the ability to apply for that internship, get that job in the chemistry stock room, have a leg up when they get to their first and second year of college and have that equipment able to be used. So be very clear and concise about what the you could say deliverables are, as it says on this, for your students. But really think of those numbers, because it goes out there a while, and it's a large number of people that are being served with this. Go ahead.
And I'm not a STEM teacher, so to speak, as one of my classes. I'm just AP biology, anatomy, and biology. And in some of the equipment that I may have originally put in as, when I wrote the grant to be used for AP biology, I can still now use it with my other classes as well, and giving them those skills as well, which is, nothing but useful. I mean, for them, for when they go beyond. So
to any other class. We can go to the next slide. And this seems kind of interesting that, we try to be as professional as possible. But one of the things, and this really stood out to me, I had written about 4 or 5 grants to the Assistance League. And one of the women approached me and said, oh my gosh, I love your grants. You always have such funny titles. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah. She goes, I always hope I get yours. So that way, she said, because they're always so well written in terms of humor. And I'm like, well, for the one that I'm going to show you in a minute I was trying to get a new microcentrifuge, and the title of my project was "You Spin Me Right Round, Baby, Right Round." And I found out by that little interaction a couple things. One, at places like the Assistance League, they are community members just like us. They're women that get together, mostly at the Assistance League, and they're each given one of our projects, either by school or by name. Like they have A and B and the other has C and D. And they are then expected to learn everything about what is being asked for and then champion it. And so they sit around a table and they're now trying to get because they've taken ownership over you and your grant, and they're trying to get yours as the one that's funded. And I'm like, I had no idea that's how that process worked. And she said, as I had stated, she was always hoping she got mine because she thought she knew it would be fun to read out at the meeting because everybody would laugh and giggle about it. I'm like, that's really interesting. The Donors Choose that I've done I've always tried to like have a title, because I go in and I look at my old high school to see if there's somebody I can fund for things for Donors Choose. And I always try to have that title that as you're going through, you're like, what? Hold on a sec. And then go in and look. And so that little thing, using humor, knowing that you're using this to address community members, is really helpful. And so it's something to think about in terms of when you write that title. Make it attention grabbing and make it fun. And it works. So we can go to the next slide. Use humor.
So this is the list of, for the most part, the ones that are in our area and school bound, like PTA, PTSO, sometimes it's PTSA, kind of just depends on the school, whatever the parent, teacher, student organization is. Boosters, yes. I've only had experience with that assistance league several times. I haven't really gone out like Michelle has with Donors Choose or anything beyond. And that's just because I haven't had the need to really. The Assistance League, and I don't know if they're, like Michelle, you just said, you think there's an Assistance League pretty much where everybody is, or I would assume there's something like Lions Club or Rotary where most people are. I just don't know if it's specifically Assistance League and everywhere. Didn't you say that, Michelle? Or not?
Sorry, I had muted my.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, they, when you look online, they have them everywhere. And even if they're not
Okay.
currently bringing, maybe applying directly to your school, you can also go out to them. They're all over and they're in every county
Okay.
in California. I actually contacted the one here in Huntington Beach, which is where I live, and had asked if they have a program at their school like we do. And she had said, no, but teachers can come in and apply through them, but they don't do it through the school. So it's like, oh, okay. So
Oh.
it's somebody you can go out and talk to, even if they're not actively advertising themselves at your school.
Right.
Good.
Next slide. And this is Michelle.
Okay. So one of the things, if you've ever been part of a group that has written a large grant, a state or a federal level grant, they are huge. And I know that's what Joe's going to be covering tomorrow. The application process that we're looking at, the actual writing of is you're going to see the papers that you're actually asked to write. At the most, are probably going to take you an hour to 2 hours. I mean, this isn't something that it's huge, but you still do have some of the specific details. And as we said, we're going to show you some of the actual ones that we have filled out. So a good idea too, if you have the people that you go to regularly, like the Assistance League, they sometimes have topics that they're being asked to cover for their grants. And so one year I happened to, I was talking to the gal that I had met, the one who commented on my titles. And she said, oh, we're trying to get money, just like you are, but to fund your grants. And we're focusing on recycling this year. And so if you kind of have an idea of the topic that they're trying to get their grants funded for, then that kind of helps in how you might actually be looking at how you're putting things together. So see if you can't build that personal relationship with one of them that you might go back to time and time again, to just ask, hey, what's your topic this year? And then that might help in terms of the private foundations like them. Okay, go ahead. So this is an actual grant that I put in with the Assistance League. And as you can see, it was called Save Your Eyes and Save Your Money. This is applicable to biotechnology, but this is also applicable to all of my labs, my macromolecule unknown lab, my photosynthesis lab that I do with the floating discs, all of those different types of things, because we have to wear safety goggles. For some very odd reason, in our science building, we didn't have safety glass sterilizing things. So I was literally after each lab wiping down the safety glasses with alcohol wipes. And what I noticed it started to do is it was like clouding the lens. So I'm like, I've got to get one of these sterilizing cabinets, which is what I did. And so this one that I wrote, it was when I was also teaching IB as well as CP bio, was specifically looking at and asking for the cabinet that then had an ultraviolet bulb that was sterilizing. So one, it made it faster. It was only 5 minutes after each lab. It could be done in between each lab, but also it filled their need that year for the recycling. Because what I really approached was, you know, the use of alcohol and paper towels to clean the plastic glasses is not only costly, it's wasteful, all of those different types of things. So that allowed me to kind of like also help them with having a grant that they had funded that then helped them to get their grants. The one that's down on the bottom is the one that I just recently did. Joe had let me use the digital dry bath from Amgen, and it worked like a dream. So I decided, okay, that this is something I want to add to my current set of biotech, and my microcentrifuge was starting to not work. So the you spin me right round, baby, right round, and then It's Hot in Here were the two titles that were essentially given to this project and was then funded. And so these are two different ones written for different reasons for Assistance League grants, and one very specific to the biotech labs, then one that really covered all of the different labs that I do. Okay, we can go to the next slide, and I think that one's Lisa's.
Yeah, so this is one I did this year. It's shedding some light on the carbon cycle because I needed CO2 probes, and this was going to be about, you know, collecting the CO2 from respiration or using how much was used for photosynthesis. But I could use it for both types of labs. Also, it was a friend of mine, a colleague, Alyssa Beeman, you can see her name on there, also put her name on it because she could use them as well. And that's another thing. If you can get someone else, think about, I mean, description of the project, we both had two different ways in classes we were going to use these probes, and they didn't care. They just want to know what you're going to be using it for. It didn't have to, you know, correlate together, I guess, in any way, some massive project. No. We stated for why is there a special need for the project? We talked about each of our individual needs of being able to collect data statistically, you know, that can be statistically used. We needed that ability to do so instead of just these, you know, the floating disk lab is wonderful. I love it. But if I could use a better method of collecting numerical data, I wanted to. And oh, that's another thing. If you go to a bunch of
Workshops.
thank you, workshops, or, you know, like conventions or things like that, you know, you get to see these things tested out and all this new equipment. And that might be a way that you're like, oh, you know what, that would be awesome to have those in my class. And so, like Michelle said, keep a running list of things that you would like to use. Later. And then you can, when the actual, you know, grants come around. That's another thing about this grant that I will say. They ask us to write these things so well, kind of late or early, I want to say kind of in the middle of the first semester, but then we don't receive the money until later. And then you might have to kind of backtrack a little bit on having to do it. It kind of just depends on the grant. I guess what happened with mine is, if you go to the next slide just real quickly. So you'll see how much money, and that's another thing. They usually have a set amount of money that they will allow for, you know, each grant. Obviously, they're not just going to have some unknown number, just, you know, put it in there and see what you get. So we made it under the value, but it turns out that my fund request for 8 probes when it was time for me to actually buy them, when I got the check, I could, with that amount, because I can't ask for any more, they already upped the price, and then I could only get 7. And it was such a bummer because I'm like, oh man, I wanted one for each station. So you have to be a little flexible sometimes, but it's just kind of I don't know how to work around that so much as maybe then the next year you apply for that one probe, I suppose. But it was ask for 9, right? Or ask
I
for
like it.
more, right? And then very good. Yeah.
Well, because one will
we actually-
break.
Yeah,
someday.
exactly. Oh, yeah.
Well, I was trying to be
that's a
nice
big-
about it and not ask for too much, I just try not to be a hoard.
Well, this year Assistance League was 2,500. And that's
Was it?
about normal for, at least we've seen over the years, the Assistance League budget that they're saying don't go over 2,500. That's kind of,
For
but as you're gonna see,
each
there's some other ones that
individual
we've pointed
proposal?
out that have a higher end.
Yeah. So, anyway, all of these ones, I've written like 3 of them in my career. I haven't written a lot of these ones in particular, but the project titles are always like, that takes me the longest because I want something like interesting or eye-catching. I mean, even if you're writing it for a huge company, make something like it said before, humorous, funny, something that's going to catch, that make them go, oh, I kind of want to read this one, right? Because
Especially
it has
on
this
Donors
interesting
Choose.
title, catchy phrase, title. And I think that's the first step, really.
Okay, so
Next
we
slide.
could pop to the next one. So I went, my big ones are PSTO, or PTSO, depending on how your school does it, as well as the Assistance League, as well as in the past, I've done things for, and I've Donors Choose, but I really kind of was looking at what are the big ones for teachers in the state of California, especially if you want a little bit more than just maybe the amounts that the PSTO and the Assistance League are able to do. And one of the big ones that came up across the board at a lot of different blogs and places that I went was the NEA Foundation. And they have what are called student success grants. They're available to all public school educators, specialized instructional support personnel. And their main focus was enhancing students' learning experiences. So definitely biotech falls into that category of, we are looking at giving them the hands-on experience of tools that they can take into the real world and into their college career and beyond. So this was one of the big ones. The link to that's on the bottom. We can go to the next slide. The other one, and this is for grant proposals up to 5,000. So this would cover, if you want a classroom set of the mini ones, which I absolutely, yes, do those. This would cover that. And so all the parts, all the in the kit for doing bacterial transformation. Grant proposals up to 5,000 will be accepted for projects which significantly advance and influence student learning. There is no way that you can't push biotech as being one of the significant advancements of student learning. And again, they are very specific. They're really good about walking you through what it is they're looking for, what they want to see. These are a little bit more of a judged on a competitive basis, but it says they may be only partially funded when you put things in. And we're going to get to what happens if you don't get the full amount. Lisa already kind of foreshadowed it, but they would be a good place to start when you're really getting that first set of biotech equipment. Next slide. The McCarthy-Dressman Education Foundation was one of the other big 4 for teachers in California. And the interesting thing here was that they're looking for small teams. So even just the collaboration of Lisa and Alyssa would really be considered to be a small team of teachers working together to one doing IB, one doing AP, one doing honors, one doing CP, however it might be broken up. And they're looking at, they award grants to individuals up to $10,000 per year for a maximum of $20,000 over 2 years. You can go all the way through the entire set of equipment you need to, all the way to protein purification to with them. and use this as kind of, again, a starting place for maybe getting your seed biotech equipment and things set up. You know, you need the eye wash stations, you need the safety glasses, you need all of that because your school doesn't have it. This would be one where you'd really want to go to for that. And they really stress that they're looking to serve populations that are the underserved populations. So that might be something really good to keep in your back pocket. And then the last one for the top 4 for California, next slide, Donors Choose. This one used to be a much better place. I started doing Donors Choose in 2013, and I've been funded fully 4 times through them. They pretty much every year for about 5 years would have a large major donor that would come in right near the beginning of the school year and fund everybody on the site. And so it used to be quite a bit easier to, as long as you had one out there, as long as you had something that was kind of sitting out there, you knew you were going to get funded for things going on. It's a little bit tougher now. There's quite a few more individuals that are on the site. And so this is one that's always good to have in the back pocket of things that, but don't depend on having those things. Is kind of what I have found over the years with this one, but it is still a good place to have some things. I just tend to keep mine kind of a lower amount. I had a kind of like I do. I had an alumni from the high school that I teach at fund me fully, but it was for $200, but still it was, they said, I just really like to see that, you know, things are still going on where I went. So it's a good idea to have these out there, but I've kind of found that when I put really big ones out there, they don't necessarily get funded. So the other ones would be a better bet for that. Next slide. So the big thing that we really wanted to bring across on this to you through was kind of the things that maybe we weren't told when we started. I mean, Lisa and I have both been teaching for more than 25 years. We've been doing biotech for more than a decade. So it really is something that has helped us is keep a running list of the things that you need. As soon as you finish a lab, as soon as you finish a unit, have a book that you write down the things that you realize you need. Maybe you've gone to, like Lisa said earlier, a workshop at an STA. Maybe you've gone to the summer program that Amgen offers, which is amazing, by the way. Write the things down, have it, because you have so much going on at the beginning of the year. That PSTO grant comes out, that's when the assistant league grants come out, and a lot of those other 4 that I posted, other than donors, which is all the time, kind of focused at the beginning of the school year. There's so much going on, it's quite easy to be like, I don't remember what it was I needed. So have literally a running list, a book that you write the things down in, your wish list. The other big thing, don't think that you need to buy it all at once. If you can't get a grant that'll cover everything, don't think, oh, and just throw your hands up. It took me 4 years of writing grants to get the 16 microscopes that I needed, so I had a class set. And I got 4 a year for 4 years. That's what I focused on. You could do the same thing with the equipment. You know, at first I got my mini 1 boxes, then I got the additional, you know, higher level pipette, then I got the microcentrifuge, which I'm now replacing. These things will and can be bought in little pieces. You don't have to have it all at once. And that's really an important thing to realize is have this list, but also don't feel like if you can't get it all to not go for it. Build it up a little bit over time. You can go to the next slide.
You also, I just wanted to make a little blurb there, is you don't even have to always use it for equipment that is, you know, can be used every year from then on. You could get stuff that are like consumables too. If you can't get funded for that from your school, you know, you could think about what you need for the next year, write the grant, get those items for the following year. It kind of just depends on what you need. Doesn't always have to be things, you know, equipment that you can use year after year.
And then, and I had cut, oh, you can pop back to Donors Choose. I had kind of mentioned this when I did donors choose, but one of the ways that I found that I got funded is I posted a link. I posted a link to the webpage they gave me on Donors Choose on my Google Classroom. Lisa uses Canvas. I know there's a way you could post it there as well. And then with my admin approval, I did ask first. I, during back to school night, handed out a, neighbor wish list and put that link onto there. And I know that some of the fundings, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. People could pay little amounts, were through some of the current parents that I had been sitting in my classroom when I talked about and said how important I thought hands-on learning was. They made little donations. So this is another way that you could kind of get yourself out there. It has, as I said, gotten a little bit more difficult with Donors Choose, but these are some ways to kind of get yourself out there for that. So thank you. You can go to the next one. And then these are links that are directly from Jo. She had them, and they will also be at the end of the state and federal grants. It's just a nice place where she's put all of the different foundations together that you can go through and see from the big to the little to the larger size grants, what things might work for you. And there's, I think, 3 slides of this is essentially what we're looking at. So quite a few different places you can go to and see when they are funding, what their requirements are, which ones you want to work towards. So we hope that this has been informative and that you've gotten some maybe little tidbits you can take back and something that makes your grant experience a pleasant one. It can be. And again, put the humor in there. It'll help.
Makes it easier.
So any questions at all? The chats were popping up for me and now they're not.
So you mentioned the humor. So I would imagine that when you're asking for money from a foundation such as Assistance League, the people there may not be scientists as well. So not only humor,
Correct.
but using more common language. And do you find that
Yes.
the larger the grants, you have to use more strictly scientific and be much more professional with your language in the writing?
That would be a question. The second part of that would be a question for Jo. But yes, we actually had discussed this earlier and missed it when we went into our own. These are average everyday people who don't speak educationese. You do have to have a smattering of the words in there that allows them to understand that you know what you're talking about, but really shoot it for the average everyday layman so you don't overwhelm them. Thank you for making that point, because we had actually talked about that as one of the points. It for us at the small grant level, I would say more right towards the average everyday person, like you were trying to explain something to a friend. That isn't also a teacher in biology. Jo, how would you address the second part of that question? Because I think that more applies to
I
your end.
still agree that you want to explain it in a very clear manner, to say you're trying to teach certain concepts about the science, but you don't have to get into the details, and definitely do not use all the jargon and all the high science vocabulary. Because if you look even at, if here's a grant from State Farm Foundation, they are not going to be scientists, right? Target field trip grants, they're not scientists. So they want to really understand why you want to do what you do, not necessarily the very specific details of what it is that you're going to be teaching. So
yeah, eduese is to be avoided. During COVID, I had a lot of parents that would tell me, I always go to your website to look at your explanation of what the school sent us because we didn't understand what they said and you explained it. And I'm like, good. And it is, we speak a language in education that we understand, but yeah, the average everyday person who's going to be looking at your grant application is not going to be in that boat. That's a great question. Thank you.
Can I ask another one?
Sure.
So let's say you're going after maybe 2 grants this year. You can't ask, if you're worried about not getting one, you can't ask for the same stuff, right? You'd probably want to ask for 2 different things.
I don't know that you would have to, but I know with like Assistance League, They ask that if you don't buy or don't spend as much as you asked for, that you please write them a check back for what you didn't spend.
Okay.
So I would think you could, and then just be absolutely honest with them and say, you know, I wasn't sure I was going to get this. I applied for a second one. It did get funded. And so I'm writing you a check back.
Okay.
They would understand that because we don't always know that we're going to get funded. We used to have a lot more people applying for the grants through the Assistance League, through our district. And there were years people didn't get funded.
Mhm.
So I would think you could, and just be honest with the people who wrote them. They do require receipts, be very good about
Right.
that. And take pictures. Assistance League now requires pictures of like the equipment being used by the students that you purchased. So really try to do that. It helps them with getting more funding for them. So that would be okay. But just be honest, if you then did get double funded, would be the easiest way to solve that.
Can I ask Lisa or Michelle? So when you receive or after you spent the money for the assistance
Mhm.
league or after you receive the award, do you write them a thank you letter or a summary report at the end of the year of this is what's happened with all the money that you gave me?
We have to do a budget receipt. They
Mhm.
have a form that you
Yeah.
have to do it. They have a budget receipt you have to fill out. You have to turn your receipts in, and most things are bought online now, so it's, you know, obviously a screenshot. They have a summary of how the project went. And
Mhm.
so we would have to turn in, you know, here's how, I think it's on Lisa's slide. Didn't you put in your, how it got, that
No,
was the slide that you put in, I think.
I don't think so.
I thought that was the summary slide, the second one down.
One. No, next one.
Yeah, but yeah.
Well,
So,
no, that was just my budget request, but
okay,
they do have a summary
yeah.
budget. Yeah,
And we have to state how
Yeah.
it was used, how it was implemented, how it went, you know, that sort of a thing. And now, as I've said, they also require photos, which
Mhm.
means we have to be really diligent about getting all of the photo releases signed and things like that. So there's a little bit more that they're requiring than they
Well,
used to, but
and they
it
used
wasn't
to,
difficult.
before COVID, they would come to your classroom and want to see it demonstrated.
Yeah.
And they
being
don't do
used.
that anymore because of COVID. They just, and then they just kind of got, I don't know why they don't go back to it, but it's, yeah. So now photos are required but they used to want to come into your classroom. So,
And they had an award ceremony where
Oh,
they'd want to
yes.
present you with the check, because then, you know, they have that photo opportunity. Always go to those. Always go to those. When you are the person who showed up to get your check and say thank you, you had a
Yep.
higher chance, I really felt, the next year of being funded as well.
Yeah.
So that was an important part of things.
Great, thank you.
Great questions.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
I have a quick question. I think it's already been answered. So if you've got funding that you applied for different grants for the same thing, but you've got funded for both of them, it would not be appropriate to then use it to buy something else on your wish list, correct?
No, you could contact them and let them know the situation. The ladies I
Okay.
met at the Assistance League are wonderful, but my gut instinct would be no.
No. Okay. So like I could contact them and say, hey, so, you know, I wrote 2 grants for the same thing just to
Yeah.
hedge my bet. You know, the other one was funded. I also have this thing that I also would like to purchase. Is that okay? And if they say yes, I go ahead and do it. And if they say, no, that's not what we funded you for, I say, okay, thank you very much. Here's your check back.
Yeah, and then say, I will be applying for that next year, and then, oh, okay, as soon as I, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I would think they would.
So Christy,
Okay.
my experience is
Yeah.
I always have a lot of other projects that I want to get funded. And so I just write for 2 different projects to 2 different
Right.
agencies. And then next year, then flip them.
Yeah. Okay.
And that way if you happen to get both, great, right? You have something to,
Right.
you have something more, and you can do 2 different projects or 2 different slants or 2 different tangents. And then next
Right.
year you have other things that you can apply for.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because I'm thinking about all of the biotech equipment that I want to purchase.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
a lot.
and it's a long list.
Right. So
Exactly.
so maybe for one agency, just apply for the gel boxes, and the other agency apply for pipettes. And so they're
Right.
not exactly the same thing.
Right. Okay.
They help your program overall.
Wonderful. Okay.
Kate, did you have a comment or question?
Do you notify your admin ahead of time or
They usually have to sign it.
Mm.
There,
Okay.
I know that for any of the, other than Donors Choose, any of the grants that I've ever done, there is a place where my administration has to sign that they're approving that this is being asked for. And so we always have to have, on anything outside of PSTO, we have to have administrator approval of it. So yes, because there's a space on there for it. So we ask them.
So Kate, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but I don't know if it's because I'm at a college and not a high school, but there's a very long lead time in order to get the administrative approvals. And for me, I actually have to write a pre-application that has to go through all the administrators before I can even apply for the actual grant. So yeah, so you want to ask your admin, what is their policy on that? Yeah, depending on how much money you're talking about.
And sometimes they surprise you and say, oh, we happen to have this grant this year and we can cover that. I'm like, really? That actually happened with having to replace the bulb in my sterilization safety glass cabinet, which was $300, and they covered it. So I thought I'd have to write another grant.
Yeah, that's another thing with high schools and junior highs, and you know, it doesn't hurt to ask. You gotta ask, otherwise you won't know what you need to write a grant for,
Yeah.
basically. So they won't necessarily tell you they have the money available all the time. Sometimes they don't even know they have the money available
Yeah.
until they look. So
And it would be great if you happen to ask another teacher, maybe from physics, chemistry, history, whatever, just also wants something similar, and then you could team up together and write a
yeah.
grant. I
Yes.
think the
Tag
team
team.
grants are really great.
That, and one of the things we found this year, which I found interesting, is one of the schools in our district found all of this equipment. I think it was in a room or in a old, in a teacher's room who had left, and they put it all out sent out an email to everybody saying, does anybody need this? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, we need this, we need this, we need this. Ask or send out an email to your district saying, we're looking for this. There might be that equipment for some of the items. I know we had a large amount of biotech equipment that was left at Mission, and it could go to other places. So also ask your colleagues. They might have come across something, in their cabinets that they didn't realize. The physics teachers now where bio was, and they don't realize what something's for. So ask. I found a bunch of gel boxes that were just hanging out in the bio stock room when I got to my new high school. I'm like, what are these doing? And used those until I got the mini ones. So that's also a good thing to look at, is put an email out, take a picture, find it online, take a picture. Has anybody seen these anywhere? You'd be surprised, some of the stuff hiding in cabinets.
And if you do
People
have
are different.
extra equipment, you can also bring them to the site coordinators, because we sometimes know teachers who have, who are using like 3 of the bio rads and they needed 2 more to replace,
Yeah.
to make their whole kit. So yes. Okay. Anyone else have questions? Well, thank you, Lisa and Michelle. I thought you guys did great, and I think you provided lots of good information. So
Did you tell how nervous we were?
I know. Terrible. Okay.
okay, I'm gonna
Well,
stop the
thank you.
recording.